It's the rainy season here in Alaska, which means that it rains almost every day. So I wanted to make a bow that would both perform extremely well in this wet environment and be extremely rot resistant. This came from British Columbia, Canada. It grows in the rainforest, and it's actually a pretty unique wood because the sapwood and the heartwood both have very different properties. So this wood is the heartwood, and this is really strong under compression, and the sapwood is really good under tension or stretching, which is exactly what the back of the bow is doing. So I'm going to end up with a two-colored bow. So since I've never worked with yew, I'm curious to see how it works under a draw knife and a rasp. So these are our first test cuts with yew and a sharp draw knife. It carves really nice, except I can already tell that the grain switches back and forth around all these knots, and it's going to be prone to tear out, which is when your knife catches the grain and then it wants to dig down. But holy cow, these ribbons are awesome. So that's a sticking point right there. Let's try it with a rasp. This is just a regular farrier's rasp. The heartwood, at least, is going to be awesome to work with. But there's two different kinds of wood, like I said. This is the heartwood, and this is the sapwood. In order to get to the sapwood, we have to take the bark off, and we have to take the bark off the entire bow anyway. While I'm doing that, I want to read you guys an excerpt from the Traditional Bowyer's Bible. The yew tree is one of nature's most perfect bow materials. It has the compression strength and resiliency, as well as being light and smooth of draw. As many have said, it makes a sweet shooting bow. Its only drawbacks are that it can be scratched and dented from hard use. Yew is also affected more by temperature change than some woods. Usually, the best yew comes from the higher elevations in the Cascade Mountains of Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. Because of the limited exposure to sunlight, the tree grows very slowly, and on average of 40 to 60 growth years per inch of wood. Typically, when removing the bark off of a stave like this, I'd have to be really careful not to break a growth ring. It grows growth rings so tight, like there's 40 to 60 growth rings per inch of wood, and the growth rings don't really show up, you'd never be able to chase a ring. But because this stuff is so strong under tension, you don't have to. The sapwood carves just as nice, if not nicer, than the heartwood. However, there are tons of pin knots on the back of this bow. Now it's time to start laying out the design of the bow. So this is 71 inches long, so 35 and a half. Would be halfway. Now that we've got a halfway point, I'm just going to take a chalk line and run a line down the center of this stave, and then we'll decide how we want our layout to be. I personally think 71 inches is too long for a bow, but since I don't know this type of wood very well, it might be nice to have a little bit of extra, and we can always shorten it later. The next step is to hog away material as fast as we can to get down to these lines. Oh, I love these chips. I just want to keep them. Make bookmarks or something. Check out that color change. That's gonna look so cool on the finished bow. So here's what I think I did wrong. Because I just put that mark down the cleanest part of the wood like I would usually with a sapwood bow, I didn't take into account how thick this edge needed to be to have enough heartwood on it. So I think I'm actually gonna end up scrapping this drawing, and I'm going to thin down the sapwood a little bit and then redraw the profile of my bow. See what I mean about how thin that orange layer gets right there? I'm going to need it to be way thicker, like this side. so that I don't end up with a super weak bow. Alright, I've shaved off a ton of sapwood, but now that I've got it down to size, I can redraw my template. I'm going to stick with a 4-inch handle, 2-inch fades on either side, and then I'll taper my ends down to 1/2 inch and leave the limbs about 1 3/4 inches wide. If you've never met me, you don't know this, but one of my many day jobs is that I'm an artist for the local art galleries. And if I've learned one thing in my years of being an artist, it's that 80% of what is perceived as artistic skill is just pencil confidence. Like when you're unconfident, you draw like a bunch of little lines instead of just one long one. And if you can just decide to do that, people will think you really know what you're doing. So now that we've got a drawing on the back of our bow, we can start roughing it out. Getting closer. Now I just need to thin down these limbs so that they'll start bending. The book says that you don't have to chase a ring with this kind of wood, but that makes me kind of skeptical. I'm feeling a little funny about it. Now that I'm getting close to these lines, I'm having to do things a little bit differently. Instead of using my draw knife, I've switched entirely to this rasp. Another thing that I've changed, and I should have been doing this the whole time, is I wrapped my handle in leather before putting it in the clamp. This is the softest wood I've ever made a bow out of. And so every time I clamp it, there's teeth marks left in the wood. Luckily, we're going to file a lot of that away when we shape the handle, but from this point forward, whenever this goes into the vise, it needs to be wrapped in something protective. I actually cut it down to 66 inches. 71 was just too long. It felt goofy in my hands. So what I've got now is a 66-inch long bow blank, and it's starting to bend. I want to put some slight recurves into this. So what I've got out here is a Coleman stove, a giant pot of water, tin foil to seal the top, and then this is just a 2x6 that I cut into a recurve form. Since this is about 1/2 inch thick, I'm gonna boil / steam it for about 30 minutes, and then I should be able to put it straight under this form and pull it down. Some woods bend a lot easier than others, and usually when I'm making a recurve, if it's gonna break, this is when it breaks. There we go, moment of truth. So far so good. I don't think we got any splinters. Oh shit, there's a splinter right there. Dang it. Clamp it down. Hopefully that's okay. Put more clamps on it. Right here underneath these clamps there's a splinter raising, but that's also where a great big knot is, so it's a thicker piece of wood than anywhere else. I'm hoping that it'll be okay. Here's that little splinter that was raising. It's wide, but not very deep. So I just put a dab of super glue on there for now. I'm sure that when I thin these limbs down, I'll remove past that splinter. So I'm not super duper worried about it, I just need to keep tabs on it. I went ahead and recurved this other side, same process, except since there was no knot on that side, it went a lot smoother. And then these are moose antler tip overlays that I had left over from a bow that actually exploded. I'm sure you'll see that in a video soon, once I redeem myself with that same kind of wood. But now that that glue is drying, I'm just gonna put it in my little cabin. Tomorrow, we will tiller, and hopefully we'll be shooting this bow. I might have to turn the camera off for a little bit, but I'm just gonna shape these tip overlays and begin the tillering process. And I'll probably wait for a break in the rain so I can pull the camera out and show you what I'm doing. First bend. Right away I can tell that the bow is bending the most in this section, and then not really at all right in here. For this limb, is bending less overall. Let's double check. And it's not bending at all right here. But overall, for the first bend, that's not too bad. Oh, feels heavy. Have to try a different technique, I guess. Okay, still kind of a low brace height, but the limbs look relatively even. I'd say this section right here needs some removing. That's 40 pounds. No noticeable hinges or anything. $52. That's perfect. Pretty stout. Before we can shoot this bow, I need arrows and I need an actual shooting string. So what I've got here is bamboo arrow shafts. And I'm gonna do what's called a self-knock, which is just sawing into the end, and then I've got this little file kit that I'll use to widen it out to fit my string. Then I've got this little bag of fletchings, again from my friend, and some of them have tape on them, like fletch tape. So you can just peel this little protective layer on. Make sure you give enough room for your fingers, and then just stick the feather, the fletching, to the shaft. For arrow points, I use spent 308 cartridges, and they slide on these perfect. So I just put a little bit of wood glue in there. I like these because they're good for stump shooting. They're great for rabbit and grouse hunting. But the best part about them is that you can get them off. And so I'll practice with the same arrows that I'll hunt with next year for black bear. Now I have two different colors of B55 and I have two nails that are 85 inches apart. I'm gonna wrap it around 3 times each color to make 6 strands of B55 that are 85 inches long. Line them up, and I'm gonna grab it probably 8 inches down the string. Now I'm just doing what's called a reverse twist. So I take my fingers and twist away, and then grab the bottom string in my fingers and pull it back on top. Twist away, pull it back on top. Roll away, twist. Just like that. We're only going to do this for the 6 to 8 inches closest to the ends. Then the rest of the bowstring, we'll add twists to it just to adjust the length. I've got about 3 inches of twisted, and then there's probably 4 inches not twisted on this end, and then like 6 feet on the other side. I'm going to take the 2 colors and put them back together, right? And that creates a loop at the end of my string. And I'm going to continue this twist until I get down past these tag ends so that it's braided back into the main line. I'll just tie my bow ears knot right here. And all a bow ears knot is an overhand knot with a couple extra wraps. Now all that's left to do is add a little bit of serving here and a little bit of serving there. I put a little thumb groove in my handle. I added a caribou antler arrow rest. I did my final sandpapering, and now I'm just going to put it back on the tillering tree and pull it back to 29 inches because I did drill a pretty big hole to put this arrow rest in. So I just want to make sure that everything looks good before I actually go shooting. Perfect. All right, here's first shot with the Yew Recurve and bamboo arrows. Nice. So this is the problem with self nocks, I guess. If you make your own nocks by cutting into the arrow, it has the potential to split. I split the entire length of the arrow with my string. In the future, I'll glue some sort of harder knock on the outside. Bummer. In the meantime, I'm just going to use arrows that I made out of cedar dowels. So overall, I'm really happy with how this bow turned out. I think 66 inches is just about right. I maybe could have gone 65 or 64. I'm definitely glad that I cut it down. My antler arrow rests, I think, are a must because I hate shooting off my hand. I find I'm way more consistent if I have an arrow rest. Feels pretty strong. But I know this will be a great hunting bow. Next spring, we always go on a annual bear hunt. I get at least one black bear every year. So I think it'd be really sweet to try and get one with this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in about 2 weeks. I have a baby now, so I'm not uploading quite as consistently as I used to. See you later.